Hi, good morning. Welcome everyone on behalf of the Hong Kong Canada Business Association. First of all, I would like to thank the co-organizer, including the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and Invest Hong Kong for the support of this event. My name is Sandra Wu. I'm the Board of Director of the Hong Kong Canada Business Association in the Ottawa chapter. This association is one of Canada's largest bilateral trade associations and has offices in 8 major cities from coast to coast in Canada. We foster business relationships and friendships between Canada and Hong Kong and throughout Asia, using Hong Kong to promote economic collaboration. The objective of today's webinar is to update the audience on the potential future changes in the healthcare sector in Canada and Asia. This webinar will look at the future of healthcare sector from both business and innovation perspectives, including the rising healthcare market in Asia, the healthcare investment landscape in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong's strategic role within the region. The entire webinar will be recorded. A copy of the recording and the PowerPoint slides presented in this webinar will be available to you upon request. We will start with a special remark by the Hong Kong government official and a video presentation from the Trade Commissioner Service at the Consulate General of Canada in Hong Kong, followed by a panel discussion. During the panel discussion, you may enter your questions in the chat box or using the Q&A function. We will try our best to answer these questions near the end of the panel discussion. After that, we will introduce the Asia Summit on Global Health, followed by closing remarks. Now, let me introduce you, Ms. Emily Mo. She is the Director of the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office in Toronto. The Toronto office is the official representation in Canada of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Its mandate is to foster closer ties between Hong Kong and Canada, especially economic and trade relationships. Among our colleagues in Canada, we often refer to Emily as the head of the Hong Kong family, as she is our point of contact. It is my great pleasure to welcome Emily to give us an opening remark. Please, Emily.
Thank you, Sandra. Hello, everyone. It's my honor to join you this morning. Speaking of health, the world has never been so vigilant. So COVID-19 has driven both public and private sectors to realize the importance of investing in healthcare. But for Hong Kong's healthcare sector is indeed maturing alongside the city's aging population and also the growing health consciousness. There have been new developments sprouting from many sides of the arena to meet intensifying demands, as well as a growing number of startups bringing big ideas to fruition. Healthcare is the dominating sector in the IPO market nowadays, and Hong Kong has become the world's second largest fundraising hub for biotech companies. Since mid-2018, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange's new listing rules allows listing of pre-revenue biotech companies. There have been so far 43 companies listed under this regime, raising a total of over $50 billion, which accounts for about 40% of the total IPO funds raised in the period. So these companies have a combined market capitalization of over $1.5 trillion, accounting for about a quarter of the current total market capitalization in Hong Kong. Regarding the INT developments in healthcare, there is an Inaugural Hong Kong Research Cluster, which is Hong Kong SAR government's flagship project. Under the project, 2 clusters on healthcare technologies, as well as the AI and robotic technologies, were set up in the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park. The project attracted many top-notch universities and research institutes, including the University of Waterloo. The first batch of about 20 R&D labs already commenced operation in the first quarter of this year. So this will further consolidate Hong Kong's position as a global research collaboration hub. Hong Kong is always the best destination for the landing of international companies and their access to the capital opportunities offered by the mainland China and Asia. Setting their foot in Hong Kong, these companies can benefit from a simple and low tax system, free flow of capital, bilingual and global professional, proximity to key markets in Asia, as well as rule of law, etc. Intact Insurance is a good example. It opened its first international AI research center and second office in Hong Kong in 2020 and 2021, respectively, during the pandemic. Encouraged by the Hong Kong's diversity and proximity to exceptional AI talent and Asian market, Intact plans to continue its expansion in Hong Kong in the coming months. So forward-looking companies in Canada and around the world may wish to make reference to Intact and use the Hong Kong platform to seize opportunities in the healthcare sector in Asia and beyond. Before closing, I would also like to update you that other than deploying new techs in healthcare, the Hong Kong government has also proposed to cope with the health manpower shortage by creating a new pathway to allow non-locally trained Hong Kong residents who are doctors to apply for full registration in Hong Kong after fulfilling a set of criteria. So who is interested, please contact my office for more information. Without further ado, I would like to pass the mic back to Sandra and the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for the opening remark. Next, I will introduce Ms. Jaclyn Chan. She is the Trade Commissioner in Hong Kong. Her team is recognized for its excellent services to Canadian companies and their counterparts in Hong Kong and throughout the Hong Kong region. Her work focuses on the sectors of life sciences and tourism at the Consulate General of Canada in Hong Kong. She is instrumental in organizing business missions from Canada to Hong Kong. She also facilitates business seminars and develops impactful strategic market research. Now let's watch her video presentation.
Good morning. My name is Jaclyn Chan. I'm the Trade Commissioner responsible for life science at the Consulate General of Canada in Hong Kong. Due to time difference, I'm pleased to share my record presentation with you. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you to the Hong Kong Business Association, Ottawa, Hong Kong Economic Trade Office, Toronto, and Hong Kong Trade Development Council for organizing this event. Today, I'm going to talk about the Hong Kong healthcare market opportunities and challenges, some suggested market entry strategies, and how Canadian companies can leverage our Trade Commissioner service network to explore markets abroad. The healthcare market in Hong Kong is small compared to other Asian markets, but it is wealthy and sophisticated. Its per capita GDP in 2020 amounted to $49,000, which made Hong Kong rank third highest GDP in Asia. Similar to many developed economies, Hong Kong also faces a rapidly aging population. The aging population over 65 years old in 2019 was around 18.4% of total population, but by 2029, it will grow to 26% and even 33% by 2039. But because of its affluence, its silver hair market potential was ranked fourth place among 15 Asia-Pacific economies. Hong Kong consumers' busy lifestyle and strong desire among consumers to increase the overall well-being will continue to produce constant growth in market for over-the-counter pharmaceutical products and nutraceutical products. Oftentimes, the Hong Kong market can serve as a hub to access opportunities in mainland China, Greater Bay Area, and the Asia region. Just in November 2020, Chinese regulators allow eligible medical institutions in Greater Bay Area to use Hong Kong or Macau-approved pharmaceutical products and medical devices without prior certification from the China National Medical Product Administration, as long as it was used by Hong Kong Public Hospital, meets urgent clinical use or with clinical advancement. Many Greater Bay Area Chinese consumers prefer to do cross-border shopping of nutraceutical and pharmaceutical products in Hong Kong because of the affordability, variety of choices, and competitive pricings compared to mainland China. As many Hong Kong companies have many manufacturing facilities and sales offices in China and Asia, they can help Canadian companies to overcome some of the hurdles and tap into this market more easily through joint venture, technology licensing, or co-development. In light of the increasing demand of healthcare services and the challenges of the aging population, the Hong Kong government has allocated substantial funding to drive the development and to support various projects, including, but not limited to, 2 public hospital redevelopment plans that aim to improve the infrastructure and medical equipment facilities in 12 hospitals and 2 community centers. Funding subsidies for elderly and rehab service centers to procure, rent, and try use of innovative medical and assistive devices. Setting up 2 research clusters to capitalize on the strength of local university and to attract leading foreign university and scientific research institutions to promote R&D collaboration in Hong Kong. Hong Kong healthcare sector is facing stressful burden and challenges caused by the increasing prevalence of chronic and lifestyle-related diseases and disability, such as restricted body movement, seeing, hearing difficulty, and mental health. The occurrence of diabetes, cardiovascular, joints, bones problems are accelerating. If not properly treated, this chronic disease will likely deteriorate into more severe problems such as cancer, heart disease, or pneumonia, which are in the 3 leading causes of death in Hong Kong. Infection control is another major challenge in the densely populated nature of the city, in particular to the spread of communicable diseases, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Hong Kong has one of the highest patient-doctor ratios in the developed world. Apart from doctors, there has been a consistently high shortage of nurses in the public hospital setting, and a high shortage of personal caretakers and other frontline workers in most nursing homes. Despite these challenges, it is believed that technology can ease some of the work burden of the healthcare workers and professionals. Therefore, any technology or devices that can reduce admission and shorten length of stay of patients in the hospital or elderly homes will be of interest. Imaging devices and diagnostic tests that can detect early disease and reduce the occurrence of chronic health issues will be highly sought. Smart assistive devices for the elderly, such as intelligent sensor, wearables, and innovative service technology, can help elderly stay mobile and live autonomously. Due to the COVID-19, e-health and mobile health solutions are also getting increasing interest. Nutraceutical and natural health products with unique functionalities will have a competitive advantage. In order to build Hong Kong as a capital market hub for innovative biotech companies, Hong Kong Stock Exchange has relaxed their listing rules for biotech firms to list in Hong Kong. Medical device companies engaged in R&D, application, and commercialization of products, process, or technologies in their biotech sphere can also be included under the criteria. Although Hong Kong is an open and highly competitive market, there are different ways for Canadian companies to tap into the market, such as setting up a presence, co-develop or in-license the brands with local manufacturers. One of the best practices is through Hong Kong agents and distributors. Canadian companies without an office in Hong Kong are required to appoint a local responsible person, in particular for medical equipment classified as Class 2 or above. In addition to serving as intermediary to communicate with the end user or the local authority to ensure safe and efficacy use of the products, the local responsible person can act as the agents and distributor to help market healthcare products in Hong Kong and sometimes in mainland China and Asia. It is especially true as the lead time for product registration, opportunity assessment, sales or tender preparation for hospital and medical contract could be quite long. To leverage the existing network and sales channel of your local partners is essential to achieve greater success. For the rehab market, the hospital authority and the related association are quite open to validate overseas smart assistive devices and technology that have strong potential of success in Hong Kong. Canadian companies can make use of such testing ground to customize and adapt their technology or products to fit the specific cultural needs of the Chinese-speaking community. Due to the massive demand from mainland Chinese customers, many Hong Kong companies are collaborating with the overseas nutraceutical or natural health products to tap into the China market through cross-border e-commerce channels. Canadian companies can also join some sector fairs and conferences in the region in order to gain more exposure and gather market intelligence. In Hong Kong, there will be several upcoming prominent fairs which highlight medical devices and rehabilitation sector. They are the Hong Kong International Medical and Healthcare Fair in October 2021, in which the Consulate will participate with the Canadian companies. In November 2021, there are two events, including the Hong Kong Council of Social Service Gerontech Innovation Expo, which showcase international rehabilitation technology for the general public for 4 days. Our office will then showcase any Canadian rehab technology after this fair and other Canadian companies by setting up a Canada Pavilion in the Gerontech demonstration site for 3 months period. On November 24th, the Hong Kong Trade Development Council will organize the Asia Summit on Global Health. More details will be explained in the later part of this webinar. Canadian companies can approach our Worldwide Trade Commissioner services if they are interested in exporting their products abroad. We have a network of trade commissioners in over 160 cities worldwide and are here to support you. Our service include providing on-the-ground intelligence, practical advice on foreign markets, connecting you to valuable local contacts, and providing assistance on resolving business problems. And working with us is free. If you are interested in the Hong Kong market and have any question related to my presentation, please feel free to contact me by email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jaclyn, for this insightful presentation. And just want to remind the audience is the PowerPoint presentation and the recording will be available to you upon request. And also I would like to remind everyone to open your chat and you could post your common questions or introduce yourself on the chat room. Now we're going to start our panel discussion. And I would like to be a little bit lighthearted by referring to our panelists as our AAA Energizer, because we have Alex, Andre, and Andy. They have rich knowledge and experience within their focus area. Our first panelist is Dr. Alex Wong. He is the Canada Research Chair in Artificial Intelligence and Medical Imaging. Alex is an associate professor in the Department of System Design Engineering at the University of Waterloo. His work in AI focuses on deep learning, computer-assisted clinical decision support, and ethics around AI. Our second panelist is Dr. Andre Carrington. Andre is an associate scientist at the Ottawa Hospital and Region Imaging Associate. His work in AI and statistics has a focus on disease detection and prognosis in medical imaging. Previously, he supported clients in Canada Health Infoway, TELUS, IBM, and the Center for Internet Security. Our third panelist is Mr. Andy Wong. Andy is the head of innovation and technology at Invest Hong Kong. With 20 years of strategy consulting and management experience, Andy leads a team of technology specialists to support overseas investment in Hong Kong. His work focuses on biotech, biomedical, medical devices, and AI robotics. The panel's discussion will now begin with a question to all the panelists. So hi, Alex, Andre, Andy, welcome on board. Could each one of you give us a quick 1-minute overview of the challenges for the global healthcare sector? And who wants to go first among yourself?
I'll go first. Happy to. So hello, everybody. So happy to be here for this panel. So just a really quick overview of some of the key, I guess, challenges that I view from a global healthcare industry perspective. So there's quite a few, but one that's particularly worth noting right now is more on the limited resources available in the global healthcare sector right now. So, and as we saw with the pandemic, the already resource-strained hospitals and clinical institutes around the world are really at the brink of exhaustion in terms of clinicians, equipment, space, and supplies, and it's really kind of been brought down to their knees because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so it's been forcing hospitals to make some very tough choices, as well as decisions on how they treat patients. And so that continues to be a chronic problem that is an increasing challenge over time. The second challenge I want to highlight is more on the increasing demand, also highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic, the increasing demand for in-home as well as local medical care compared to just the typical, I guess, doctor visits And so this increased demand ranging from things like remote doctor visits to courier services for drug delivery has now really become very apparent, especially now with patients unable to visit their doctors, unable to visit their pharmacies, as well as visit certain locations for special care as well as screening. And so these are becoming especially challenging, especially because earlier on we were talking about the aging population, which have particular difficulties in visiting healthcare professionals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alex.
Excellent. I'll go next. Thanks, Alex. I'm going to take a slightly different view of things, looking at technology. I'm just going to share my screen. We talked about artificial intelligence in healthcare, and I just wanted to put on the screen the typical flow that we usually follow to create artificial intelligence models. But it all starts with data. And there are challenges and work that need to be done, opportunities to use doctors' time more efficiently in each of these steps. So the first step is making sure that data are clean, and if we need to find tumors and outline or segment them before we put them into the processing for machine learning, there's artificial intelligence that we can apply there, including from an innovation perspective, using virtual reality, not just to look at the brain, which is the image on the left in this case, where often we look at images which are 2D slices, but now we can use virtual reality or augmented reality to look at the brain in 3 dimensions. And so doctors are starting to be able to use that to more quickly be able to identify and correct what is found to be the outline of a tumor in the brain. So even if we use artificial intelligence, for example, to identify that outline automatically, doctors still need to take some time to correct it. So there are opportunities throughout, but some of the key challenges really have to do with people. Alex mentioned the resource shortage in terms of the huge focus on intensive care units, for example, for COVID. There's also the challenge of trying to attract and retain AI talent, pretty much almost in any industry, but particularly in healthcare, where which doesn't typically have as competitive a pay, and there are constant calls from other companies. So it's essential that we also have a team that's able to be effective once a person is on board. And this diagram here comes from a report by the Information Communications and Technology Council here in Canada. They partnered with Microsoft, and they were looking at this problem of the talent pipeline. And they identified that there are 3 key skills that exist in any given case. But specific to healthcare, the domain expert, which is the clinician or doctor, is pretty much the one who tends to drive a given project. But you also need someone on the bottom left, a business expert, who oversees the research direction. And then, of course, on the bottom right, you need an AI person. So making sure that you have such a team for a successful initiative, that you can attract such a team, these tend to be some of the challenges. And I think there'll be some other challenges that we'll discuss as we go.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. So maybe I'm the third A to talk about the challenges, right? So first of all, good morning to everyone. It's always a pleasure to be together with professor and also scientists, and then make me look a little bit more intelligent in the talk. So I think for the challenges, right? So I think data is a one that we need to consider more seriously, because of the now I think people is moving to the precision medicine, right? Because of precision medicine, people need more data to analyze the genomes of each individuals, right? And then it create a lot of data, and then it create a problem about how to handle the data, how to store the data, how to protect the data, avoid any cybersecurity threat, and also the ownership of the data to get the authorization of using the data. The interoperability between different data, because usually the data are very fragmented, silo to everywhere. So a good example, because in Hong Kong, we launched a genomes project last year in May. And then the model that we deployed for analyzing those genomes data will be using a federated approach, meaning that we want to keep the data locally in different database. And then using the model is to like sending the model to the data instead of bringing the data to the model. So in that case, we can keep the data in the different location and then protect the data more publicly. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Thank you, Alex, Andre, and Andy, like to give a quick introduction on the challenges in the healthcare sector. So now I do have since Alex and Andre, you talked about AI a little bit, and I would like to know, because I know that both of you are doing a lot of research and development work, in your domain area. Could you two tell us more about innovation, specifically in AI, machine learning, computer vision, and pattern recognition, and then maybe elaborate a little bit more from your view. What would be the opportunity, the future of healthcare, like from an innovation perspective?
I'll just get started, and then I think I always like to have an engaging dialogue with Andre. It's always a lot of fun. So as I mentioned, there's quite a few challenges, as well as other panelists here, about in terms of need for in-home care, scarcity in resources, certain difficulties in privacy and data. And so there's been actually, with a lot of these challenges, has been a lot of great opportunities that has opened up, and AI seems to be one of the best solutions to help address this in a positive, impactful way. So I'm just going to talk briefly about three key innovations, one of which that both Andre as well as Andy has actually touched upon. So the first, I guess, significant innovation I'd like to mention from an AI for healthcare perspective has been in the notion of deep learning, which has been really showing significant advances for supporting clinicians in a wide range of clinical decision tasks, such as disease screening, patient triaging, risk stratification, treatment planning, assisted surgery, and so on. And even like, as Andy mentioned, things like drug discovery, clinical trials, and so on and so forth. And so with deep learning, which is the ability to teach complex yet powerful neural networks by showing it the wealth of data, as Andy mentioned, it's able to take insights and look at these subtle patterns and put it together to make better decisions to support clinicians. And we've already seen a huge amount of success with, leveraging things like imaging data through convolutional neural networks like X-rays, CT scans, MRIs, for assisting radiologists and doctors in making decisions, all the way to transformer networks that analyze electronic medical records and so on and so forth for treatment planning. And so this has really facilitated for, I guess, computer-aided decision support systems to help clinicians treat more patients, care for patients more effectively, as well as Andy mentioned, really facilitate for precision medicine. So an example of this, recently in of the COVID, pandemic, myself, University of Waterloo, as well as one of the startups from our lab, Darwin AI, has released COVIDNet, which is a global open source deep learning solution for COVID-19 clinical workflow, all geared around deep learning, and it's been successfully used around the world. The second innovation I want to emphasize is because of the challenge of privacy as well as trust in healthcare, because trust is pivotal in healthcare, has been the rise of advances in explainable AI, which is the ability to not just have a black box of AI, but to open this black box and really understand what its inner workings are. And this is very important because with AI, one of the key things, it's not about replacing the automation. It's about working with clinicians and healthcare workers. And so therefore, the ability to explain the rationale and decisions behind AI decisions become very important for trust, as well as helping doctors with better insights. And so the last thing I'm going to really mention from big innovation is exactly related to what Andy was talking about in terms of is the notion of federated learning, which is really being seen as a big enabler. As Andy mentioned, one of the big challenges with being able to teach AI, in healthcare is just the bottlenecks of access to private patient data, provisions, and so on and so forth. There's just a lot of regulatory bottlenecks. And with federated learning, where AI can be trained in a more decentralized manner, AI in the privacy of individual clinical institutes and companies, it really opens up huge opportunities to build more powerful AI that's able to see the diversity of data from many different sources while still preserving patient, I guess, privacy. I'll talk more about like, how I view the future, but I really love to hear, I guess, Andre's thoughts on what are some of the key innovations.
Well, Alex, I think we've touched on the ones that are most interesting that we should stick to, actually. I'd love to ask you a question, if you don't mind, about some of your views on sort of where are we at in terms of explainable AI? Like, do you see this, that we're sort of early in this field? And I have the same question about federated learning as well.
So, I mean, my thoughts in terms of explainable AI is that it's actually at the right stage right now. A lot of people have been viewing, I guess, explainable AI more as a buzzword, right? Everyone goes around explainable AI, I'm explaining this, but what does it really mean and what does actionable, tangible value come in? So right now there's been a movement towards what we call, including from my lab, the notion of quantitative explainability, which is rather than just giving you like a rough view, here's some hotspots here and there. It really doesn't link to the actual decision-making process. With quantitative explainability, we can actually highlight the exact critical factor that led to a particular decision. And also give you the quantitative justification as to why, which is, when I'm looking at this area, like for example, in COVID, by looking at this ground glass opacity or bilateral abnormality in this specific region of the lung, which is our explanation, then it's very confident that it is a SARS-CoV-2 infection. But when it's looking at other areas of the lung, that the explanation didn't highlight, it actually thinks it's just typical bacterial pneumonia. It's that kind of explainability that maps the explanation to a actionable insight that a clinician can take. And I think we're there. And I firmly believe that because of, I guess, Darwin and I, one of the stars from Waterloo, from our lab, we've actually created this explainable AI that's actually quantitative and used, I guess, right now around the world. And so I think with explainability, I think we're there. With federated learning, I'm also a firm believer that we're at the stage where it's really seeing a huge amount of impact and value. And so there's been a number of studies, I guess, recently, within the last couple of months, where they've actually leveraged federated learning across multiple hospitals to create, for example, a COVID-19 AI for detecting whether individual should get oxygen therapy or not. And there's been a lot of different sites, and I think even Andy can talk more about some of the, I guess, activities on federated learning on the Hong Kong Invest side, where it is at the stage where we're beyond just theory and we're getting into practice.
The theory definitely is promising in the sense that, or more than promising, it's been shown, theoretically, that at least under most conditions for the data, that you can achieve essentially the same performance as if the data were centralized. But instead, with federated learning, we're talking about the data being kept, for example, within each hospital. And as Andy referred to, the model being sent, sort of, or parts of the model being sent to each hospital. So that's exciting. I really haven't heard of many projects occurring here in Canada with respect to that. So I really look forward to that.
Well, most definitely. I was actually also going to ask Andy a quick question. Sorry to put Andy on the spot.
Yeah,
what do you feel are some of the bottlenecks that you've seen from, I mean, federated learning is so, I guess, promising and powerful. Have you seen any like bottlenecks or obstacles that's slowing adoption? For example, as Andre just mentioned, it's very promising, but we're only kind of starting to look into it from a Canadian perspective. What are your views?
I think in the case of Hong Kong, we are also learning it as well. The reason why we come up with the federated learning or federated model, because for the genomes project we just mentioned, and then because there's a couple of ways to create this genomes database. So the traditional method is more centralized methodologies, right? But that doesn't, I think we were facing a lot of issue about transferring the data. That's the reason why we come up with a federated model, which is the one that in the UK has been using, right? Genomes England. And then that model is a federated one. I think that will be a good model to resolve the issue about how to resolve the issue about transferring the data. So and also I think through the access, then we just want to extract those insights rather than the raw material, so that in that case, right, we can avoid the kind of the privacy issue of those data. I think that's the benefit of using it. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's great. So I guess based on your perspective, it's really having the challenge and opportunity that acted as kind of like a catalyst for pushing adoption. Maybe that's something that we need to find a similar kind of problem on the Canadian side to really push things forward. So I do have a question for, I guess, Andre. So I think one of the things that Sandra kind of mentioned was, what does the future of healthcare sector look like from an innovation perspective? So what are your thoughts before I give what my thoughts are?
Wow, I feel like I need to defer to the clinicians, since I'm a doctor of engineering and a scientist, although I work in healthcare. I guess I did allude, or I briefly described some use of virtual and augmented reality. We're also using 3D printing for pre-surgical planning, but that's not really 10 years out from now. When it comes to that, I guess we still have as yet to see much use of machine learning, particularly reinforcement learning, for planning anything that has a sequence of events, or what we call sequential decision making. So that's, for example, a set of dosages over time, as used in cancer, for example. These are more complex decisions because they're not, a single decision, but instead you have to consider a path, or a care pathway, if you will. So I think there's still a good, more penetration for AI to make into areas of healthcare where it isn't yet quite commonly used. That's one of the, I think, opportunities or potential innovations.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And just going from that, at least from my perspective, even at a high level, from an innovation perspective, I really see a big feature. It's related to what you're talking in terms of, but it's a little broader in terms of, I see a big feature in the hybridization of in-home remote patient care, as well as in-person clinical patient care, with, I guess, kind of what you described, the clinical AI collaborative kind of strategy as being the core for this hybridization. And this hybridization really allows for greater accessibility as well as scalability of healthcare to be able to better serve the masses in I think for me, in a more affordable, efficient, and effective manner. And the other key thing is also, I think, as Sandra alluded to from an aging population perspective, is pretty much a greater emphasis on preventative care versus just acute care, which is, so right now acute care is somebody has symptoms, somebody has disease, they go in, they get treated, but more is how do we prevent the disease from happening in the first place? And that's where things like, the rise of in-home monitoring technologies using AI, as well as other ways to interact with, I guess, for independent living and so on, so becomes, I think, a much bigger part of the future of healthcare.
That's an excellent point. I can extend that, I think, as well, Alex, with the fact that it's also extending, we talk about Dr. Google. People will have Googled something and then they go to their doctor and they're bringing information in. That's occurring on an increasing basis, and we're providing tools to do that. So at the Ottawa Hospital, there's the Big Life Lab, which provides a life expectancy calculator, for example, as well as other so-called, and it's AI behind it, sometimes statistics, but whichever. The point is that you can use these tools to predict, how would I do if I made certain lifestyle changes with regard to my diet, my sodium intake, what's my life expectancy, and things like that. So increasingly tools, and there's other decision-making tools, for example, Be the Choice, which is not an AI tool, but it's a decision tree, which is sort of one of the early predecessors to AI. And when I say decision tree, this is a tree of choices that if you were a cancer patient, you would want to understand how to navigate the options that you have as a patient. Because often doctors, when you see them, don't have time to really explain all those different options, and they're often limiting those options. So I think technology will play an increasing role in that and in those opportunities. So and we've already heard about a patient-centric focus, but I think this is going to become even more interesting. Patients will have more tools, and yes, we'll see more democratization of healthcare, more control for patients. We have an elderly, unfortunately, like an elderly life expectancy predictor, aside from the life expectancy calculator, that looks at folks who are having home care. They often go through a certain assessment of, can they get up from the bed? Can they make it to the washroom on their own? And so we can do predictions based on that, when they might become frail and need a greater level of home care or need palliative care. So tools like this are now starting to enable caregivers to make decisions, and we're starting to provide those tools directly to patients.
Well, that's really wonderful. Essentially, we're kind of pretty much really aligned on our thoughts in terms of beyond just the standard acute care that we're offering in person right now, but expanding to kind of like an end-to-end preventative and acute care to cover a much broader range of patients, even before they get diseases, and being to be informed both as a patient level as well as a clinician level on the different aspects of, to get a much more complete picture of a patient's profile across the way. Now, that's exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Alex and Andre, for providing your insight from an innovation perspective. Personally, I'm actually quite excited to hear there is a breakthrough, in the area of deep learning, and learn more about the explainable AI. So now I want to look at the similar topic, but from a business perspective. So Andy, like, you have been doing a lot of work to build linkage between business, medicine, and technology. Could you tell us more about the healthcare investment landscape in Asia, and how does Hong Kong's strategic position play a role to support Canadian companies to ride on these opportunities?
Yeah,
Indeed.
Thank you, Sandra. So maybe I have a couple of slides to show. Would be easier for me to explain the kind of the opportunities. So let me share the screen first. All right. So I think to start with, I think this slide is a little bit busy, but I think it gives an overall view about how it works in Hong Kong for the biomedical development. So I just use the value chain from the basic research to preclinical to clinical trial, and then commercialization, go to market for different kind of a stakeholder, right? So there's different layers, right? I start with the academic, and then followed by the government, and then the private sector, and then the public, which is the healthcare systems, right? So for the academic, right, starting with the basic research, definitely will come from the university. So lucky that we have 6 universities in Hong Kong, which are ranked the top 100 globally. And then for the translation research, it's mostly, we have a park called Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, which is the funded by the government. Within the park, they have different cluster focus, including electronics or maybe AI robotics. But one of the key cluster is called Biomedical Technology Cluster, in which they offer an incubation program, which is a 4-year program with a total of 6 million Hong Kong dollar kind of subsidized, right, including financial support and also some subsidies on rental. And then so you can move into the science park as an incubator or move in as a tenant, and then you can use the shared facility over there. And then they also have a science park venture fund helping them to invest into different companies, support them from a funding perspective. And also, in addition to the science park, and then there's another one called Hong Kong Shenzhen Innovation and Technology Park, which is 2 or 3 times bigger than the science park, which is in the border between Shenzhen and Hong Kong. The whole idea is that we want to build a synergy between Hong Kong side and also the China, which is the Shenzhen, to stimulate the synergy around these 2 areas. And then moving on to the clinical trial, we have 2 very well-known medical schools, Hong Kong, the University of Hong Kong, and also the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So both of them are quite well-known in doing they have a lot of doctor and also PI available in different areas from these 2 universities. And then moving on the commercial, for the science park, they have another building, another advanced manufacturing center for doing manufacturing the medical device. And also from the university part, they have a technology transfer office. They're aggressively trying to commercialize their technology using the IP licensing or sponsor research. And then for the second layer is about the government support. So the government do have a lot of different funding. As Emily mentioned about, we have a health at Hong Kong, which is the project which is launched by the government, which collaborate the different university together to conduct on the research. And then from the funding side, we have the venture fund, we have a talent research hub, which is subsidized of the kind of the people who you employ who are working on the R&D. And then we have tech startup support scheme, which is a funding for the university to support the professor or the student trying to spin off their company to move on to the commercial side. And then the enterprise support scheme and also partner research program are all one-to-one matching, and some cash rebate and also tax deduction if you are doing the R&D functions. And then moving on the clinical trial, Hong Kong, for the drugs, right? We don't need to do local clinical trial. We rely on the other company to get the clinical approval, 2 of them, and then the drugs can be registered in Hong Kong. And then for the medical devices, voluntary registration in Hong Kong. And then moving on to the commercial side, Hong Kong definitely is a lot of advantage from the financial perspective, and including Emily mentioned about the Chapter 18A, which is listing particular for the biomedical industry. From the private sector, we have from the very early stage, we have for the incubator, we have the different PE/VC fund available in Hong Kong. And also moving on to clinical trial, all the global regional CRO is already in Hong Kong. The reason why they are in Hong Kong, they are doing because of China and Western side. If the drugs want to, having got the FDA already, and then want to move into China, they need to do the clinical trial, right? And then it's under the control by NMPA, called the National Medical Product Administration in China. And then in Hong Kong, you can do a bridging study to, which is similar to the phase 3 kind of clinical trial. And then for those drugs which is already registered in FDA, and then you can do the bridging study so that it can be, you don't need to go through the whole process of clinical trial in China, but you can do the bridging study in order to get the approval under the NMPA. And also multiple regional clinical trial as well, and then a clinical trial for the FDA EMA approval as well. And all the pharmaceutical company is already in Hong Kong. And then underneath the healthcare system, right? So the position is not totally in line because I don't have space to put the healthcare system in Hong Kong, because 90% of healthcare is provided by public and then 10% by the private. And we also have another university hospital called the University of Hong Kong and Shenzhen Hospital, which is established 2-3 years ago in Shenzhen. And the Genomes project I just mentioned which is a very good one, looking at building up the genomes database for Hong Kong people to serve 2 purposes. One is for the clinical trial, for the clinical application. The other is for scientific research teaching purpose. And then the data will be available to clinical people as well as for the research institution who can have the enormous data. And then 2 clinical trial centers available in Hong Kong, Queen Mary Hospital and Prince of Wales Hospital, which is accredited by the NMPA for phase 1 clinical trial. And the last one is about the commercial side for the Smart Hospital in Hong Kong. There's 2 kind of hospital. One is the hospital is called Chinese University Hong Kong Medical School, and then they launched the Smart Hospital. The whole idea is that three people, you have to make them happy. One is about the patient, the other is about the doctor, the third one is about the people who work in the hospital. So as we mentioned earlier, because we sort of doctors, sort of everything, so we really need to rely on the technologies to enhance the operation of the hospital, as well as the patient, the journey as well. So I think I just stop here. I think for the rest of the slide is more to enforce the story. So I go back to you, Sandra. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So now I'm looking at, we receive questions and comment from the chat box. So I think the first one, I'm going to pass it to Andre, maybe Alex could also respond to it, is there's a comment about there's many the simple procedure and processes. For example, will be, like proper wound dressing to prevent bed sore or skin tear, routine like cleanliness or sterilization process that takes up a lot of time from clinicians and nurses. How could AI be utilized in those in that context, in those procedures? So, and then I have another question. While Andre and Alex responding to that one, maybe Andy, you could look at the last one. It's about do Hong Kong-based pharmaceutical company have full distribution right across mainland China? So maybe Andy, so I think now I'm going to pass it to Andre, and then Andy maybe could address to the second question.
Sure. Yeah, I wrote an answer there, but I'll just sort of reiterate what I wrote there. Essentially, you're right. Like, so Philippe raised a concern that there are these, I guess, the main business of the hospital is or healthcare in general is to take care of the patient, and there's sometimes their immediate needs like bed sores, etc. And sometimes AI can help with some of those emergency or immediate concerns if it's unclear, if some of those decisions on the best treatment are unclear. And there are some examples of that. I certainly don't know about wound care specifically, but I know, for example, in surgery, when a patient is intubated, a tube's put down their throat so that they can breathe, COVID being one example when that occurs, but it also occurs for any lung surgery. When you need to take out that tube for the best outcome for the patient is not an easy decision. And so we're using AI to help make that decision. So there are situations like that, as well as another one which I wrote there in my response. When people present with heart problems in the emergency room, we also have a tool which the syncope risk score, and we've also used AI for that, as well as statistics, to try and figure out, is this a serious serious heart problem? Is it syncope or is it not? So tend to the main business. AI research and AI can help with the main business, but usually in specific circumstances. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Andre.
Sure, I'm happy to add a little to what Andre's talking about. And just beyond that is, I think there's been a lot of efforts on AI from a treatment planning perspective that kind of mirrors some of the question here. And a lot of people, sometimes when you see the big studies has been treatment planning for, I think things like Andre mentioned, fractional dosage for radiation therapy, things like, drug dosage for chemotherapy and so on. So I guess those are the big ticket items that gets a lot of attention. But there's actually been quite a lot of studies right now that's focusing more on decision support for things like that was just mentioned, things like bed sores, for things that are less about guiding dosage, but about the standard procedures of how to treat a certain wound or a certain minor disease. And there's also been a lot of effort also on the digital medicine side, more on like things smartphone health and so on and so forth, chatbots and so on and so forth, where the focus has been more on giving simple guidance and recommendations through AI on things to do for things that, for example, I cut myself, how should I treat it? I have certain minor symptoms. Is there any remedies that I could leverage? And so I've been seeing a lot of attention, not just on the big ticket hard items that people say, like cancer, but also on things like, emergency care, wound healing, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alex. Okay, so Andy, I know that there's several questions for you. Maybe we do need to follow up offline, but could you pick answer one of them?
Okay, the quick one. Of course, I will pick the easy one first, right? So, so the question is about whether the Hong Kong-based pharma company have full distribution right to mainland China, the answer unfortunately is no, because that's why we call one country, two systems. So the two different systems. So in Hong Kong, as I mentioned in my talk, right? So for the drugs to be used in Hong Kong, we don't need local clinical trial because it's not justified for 7 million people to have a clinical trial. So that's why we rely on the two different countries. As long as the drug has been done the clinical trial with accepted in two countries, and then we rely on these two countries, the drug can be used in Hong Kong. But for China, you need to go through the local clinical trial in China. That's why there's a difference. So for the pharma company, the drugs being used in Hong Kong cannot have, those drugs cannot be used in China. But having said that, we have the facilitation measure, which is for the GBA area, is we're trying to implement this facility, meaning that for the commonly used drugs in the public hospital in Hong Kong, then for emergency use, that can be used in a designated institution in China. Right now, the pilot program is for the Hong Kong University and Shenzhen Hospital using the drugs. We have a list of drugs that getting approval, then those drugs, if got approval without the need to do the local clinical trial in China, but can use that in that designated hospital. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Andy. So in the interest of time, we have to stop our panel discussion at this point. I can see more questions in the chat room and also under the Q&A. So after this webinar, we will go over those questions and follow up individually. Now, as we have just talked about the opportunities in healthcare in both a business and innovation perspective, I would like to invite Ms. Adrian Ho from the Hong Kong Trade Development Council to talk about an upcoming event. The Hong Kong Trade Development Council is a semi-governmental organization promoting international trade, import and export of products, services, and technologies. Ms. Adrian Ho is the marketing manager of the Toronto branch of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. Her team members describe themselves as your business matchmaker, assisting your company in expanding your business in Asia and throughout Hong Kong. Adrian, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sandra, for the introduction and having me today to share an overview of the inaugural Asia Summit on Global Health, scheduled to take place November 24, 2021 in Hong Kong. So before I delve into the event details, here's a snapshot that presents both the current challenges and potentials of today's global healthcare industry, where our panelists and speakers have mostly addressed earlier, such as the disparities in global healthcare spending, challenges shown under the pandemic, and opportunities such as increase in cross-border investment in healthcare and potential to grow, as mentioned by Jaclyn, and high adoption of technology that drives healthcare digitalization. So against this backdrop, the Asia Summit on Global Health serves to provide a platform to gather industry players to facilitate international collaborations between project owners and investors, and to provide latest updates from global innovators and experts. So for my presentation today, I'll focus on 4 main items: the event highlights, audience profile of the summit, why should you consider attending, and participation fee and format. Please stay to the very end where I will announce a special offer for webinar attendees today. The Asia Summit on Global Health is jointly organized by the Government of Hong Kong SAR and the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. The inaugural summit is positioned as Asia's premier international conference on health innovation and investment that will bring together senior government officials, investors, influential business leaders, financial and professional service providers, as well as renowned academia from related sectors from around the world. Hosted in Hong Kong, one of the world's most important and best connected financial centers and innovation hubs, the summit will explore areas of global collaboration in healthcare and showcase new business opportunities and partnerships for investors and project owners. As the event aims to foster international collaboration on global health issues, the full-day program would comprise of a high-level symposium on healthcare investment outlook, latest innovation and technology showcase, updates from policymakers on responses under the new normal, dialogues with global pioneers and health, business advice offered by industry experts, And alongside the main conference program, there will be project pitching and networking sections to facilitate more in-depth discussions. Depending on travel arrangements, side trip to the Greater Bay Area and or visit to Hong Kong health tech ecosystems will also be arranged for participants attending in person to arrange to enrich the program. So I invite you to join the Asia Summit on Global Health Community for your year-round update on the conference. The summit will focus on 4 thematic tracks where health experts, business and investors on biomed and healthcare development will offer insights and intelligence with in-depth discussions on these areas, including biotechnology, medical device and drugs, digital health, community health, and wellness. Potential speakers will consist of leaders from finance and investment-related conglomerates and sectors of medical, healthcare, and innovation. Audience profile. At the summit, expect some 1,000 attendees on site, as well as delegations from around the world. The summit is planned in hybrid format, where we're expecting sizable physical attendance from local regions, in addition to others joining us online through the worldwide reach of HKTDC's 50 global offices, which include our Toronto office here in Canada. You would expect to meet fellows, investors, and financial service professionals, business leaders and industry players from the healthcare sector, innovative and tech companies, startups, professional service providers, government officials and regulators, R&D institutes, incubators, accelerators, researchers, and medical professionals. A reference would be our Council's anchor event, the Asian Financial Forum. AFF is renowned for Asia's premier platform for thought leadership, innovation, and networking for global financial leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs. You can see from the screen here, the event attracted C-suite financial and business leaders, notable speakers, including Dr. Janet Yellen, key sponsors, international media partners to gather at the forum. In the audience today, I see a few of our AFF delegates here, who have all been an integral part of our in-person Canadian financial missions in the past, and the virtual delegation in January this year, where we had a remarkable mission with 119 Canadian delegates attending the online event. After the event, delegates shared with me that they've made connections with potential partners, startup companies, and arranged follow-up meetings and like to replicate the success and continue building the momentum to have Canadian business leaders and industry players from healthcare sector to explore business opportunities and international collaborations through the Hong Kong platform. So why attend? Positioned as Asia's premier international conference on health innovation and investment, the event brings together key players, decision makers, train drivers to address trending topics. Participants will be invited to explore the immense business opportunities in Asia, including mainland China, and collaborate on the forefront of the healthcare industry. Delegates will be able to join experts on the in-depth discussions in the 4 thematic tracks to connect with investors from global healthcare sectors, immerse in innovative minds at global project pitchings, and meet with industry experts, business advisors, and pioneers in health. There will be an exhibition zone to summit showcase. There will be exhibitions shown at a summit to showcase the unique capabilities from Hong Kong and overseas, supported by the HKSAR Government Convention and Exhibition Industry Subsidy Scheme. Local or overseas exhibitors will be subsidized 50% of the participation fee. So details of the package are available upon request. Please send me a message if you're interested, and I'm happy to share more information. For startups in biotech, health tech, and medtech, with funding rounds ranging from seed to Series B, target to raise a maximum of 10 million USD, and also establish no more than 5 years, you may consider the InnoHealth Showcase, an exhibition area dedicated to connecting startups and investors and partners around the world. Exhibitors at this zone will also be subsidized at 50% of its participation fee. So in addition to the exhibiting opportunities, for those who would consider joining us as visitor delegate, the standard fee of a full pass is 400 USD, with 50% of the fee already covered by the scheme. Early bird special price at 280, expiring end of September. But for our Canadian delegates, we are pleased to offer the exclusive delegate digital pass for members of Hong Kong Canada Business Association. My head office also approves to extend this digital pass offer to attendees of webinar today. So at $50 per person, delegates will be entitled to the same offer as full pass holders attending the summit physically. You'll get access to the streaming sections at the online platform, online networking with other summit participants, and priority to join year-round business matching and our online activities. You also get complimentary admission to the physical summit in case you would decide to travel to Hong Kong in November. So if that sounds interesting to you, please send me a message and I'll reserve your pass and send you the promo code for the online registration when the system launches very soon in June. So that's all I would like to share today. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Adrienne. So now we're approaching the end of this webinar, and due to time conflicts, I will be delivering the closing remarks on behalf of Ms. Amy Wilness. Amy is the president of the Ottawa chapter of the Hong Kong Canada Business Association. Amy has led the Ottawa chapter in winning 7 national and international awards in Canada and Hong Kong. Amy would like to give a big thank you to our speakers for the insightful sharing and also the co-organizer for making this event possible. The Hong Kong Canada Business Association is a network of Hong Kong and Canadian government organizations, trade associations, and international businesses. If you like today's webinar, we invite you to join our network. For additional information or request PowerPoint slide presented in this webinar, you can contact Adrienne by email, and you're going to see her email address on the screen shortly. So until next time, please stay safe and be well. Thank you.